Quick one-word reaction, folks. The Dallas Mavericks are rolling 7 straight wins, 11-1 since I went out on my balcony. They're the 2 seed currently in the Western Conference. Woo, that feels good to say. Oh, okay, me from the future. This can only be one of 2 things. Good, bad. Are we first in the West? Just tell me right now.
Fuck you.
Me?
Yeah.
What'd I do?
What'd you just say they were? Second in the West?
Yeah, they're second in the West.
You're weak.
How am I? Yeah. What are you talking about? What are you?
Good men make weak men.
No,
good times make weak men.
How
does that go?
I can look it up on Facebook if you want me to. We can find it real quick.
No, it doesn't matter. Look, I need you to mentally prepare for what's to come.
All right, you're scaring me a little bit.
Yeah, 2 words for you. Spencer Dinwiddie.
Oh,
dribble.
God.
Dribble.
Oh.
Dribble.
Okay. Dude,
dribble.
Luka just came back from a wrist sprain. He's playing his best basketball this season. He's back in the MVP conversation. And you know what? He just might win it because...
How could this happen?
What? Kyrie's going to make the All-Star game, man.
Oh,
He's playing...
No. Hey, you're going to the Christmas Day game, right?
Yeah, I'm going to be there. 3 minutes left in the second quarter. I need you to run on the court and tackle Luka Doncic.
Dude, are you a psycho?
You have to do it.
No, that's insane. I'm not going to do that.
You just cost the Dallas Mavericks the season. Congratulations. No, you just did. You just told
are
everybody
you
that you don't care.
Dude, this
is crazy. I have no idea what you're talking about at all. This is.
You think Mario Madison is responsible for this?
I don't know what we're referencing, but it's very possible.
She could be.
She's evil. It's very possible. Something's up.
What are your thoughts on heroin?
Just haven't thought about it much, but
kicking the tires here.
If you want me to hold your hands, be your binky, tell you that this is cool, everything's cool, I can't do that, folks. I don't know what's happening. I don't know where this ends up going, but I could tell you right now. Can we get much lower? So low. Maybe, actually, maybe. I don't even want to say that because actually maybe the Mavericks can go lower than this. This is what a season from hell looks like, ladies and gentlemen. The Dallas Mavericks played the New Orleans Pelicans last night and enter the game. I see this. How do you lose to the Pelicans? How do you lose to the Pelicans? The Pelicans are playing better basketball as of late. They were without Zion Williamson last night. The Mavericks' second night of a back-to-back on the road without their 3 best players, or at least their top 3 of their 4 best players, depending on where you place Derek Lively on the hierarchy of Dallas Mavericks players. They were underdogs entering this game. I know that sounds impossible to believe because the New Orleans Pelicans entering this game were a measly, what was their record? A measly 9-32, but they have won now 3 of their last 4 games, I believe. It was funny because whenever I was looking at their team page over on ESPN, they had this hilarious little tidbit up. Alleged goaltend. Apparent goaltend. Mavs say no call on apparent goaltend costume. What the fuck do you mean apparent goaltend? That was a goaltend. They've won 3 of their last 4 games. They've won 5 out of their last 8 games, and they beat the Dallas Mavericks last night, 119-116. The Dallas Mavericks are spiraling here, folks. 3 straight losses. They've lost since Christmas Day. 8 games. They're 3-8 since then. If you want to add in the Christmas Day game when Luka got hurt halfway through it, they're 3-9 in their last 12 games played. It's rough. It's tough scenes. The vibes are some of the lowest I've seen, at least since the 2022-2023 season, just across the fandom. And I'm here to tell you right now, this is what a season from hell looks like. I mean, a game like that against the Pelicans, again, you were underdogs entering the game, and you played terribly down the stretch. We could talk about that. The Mavericks found themselves down, 10 points to this lowly Pelicans team. That Pelicans team last night, without all of your guys, had the 3 best players on the court. CJ McCollum, DeJounte Murray, Trey Murphy, all of the 3 best players on the court in that game. The Pelicans had them, and the Mavs got fucked. I mean, I don't know what to tell you guys. They got robbed in this game. That was a goaltend. And I would, look, fouls, whatever, that stuff happens, end of games. You could highlight a foul call, a call that they hardly ever call at the end of games, or a foul where you could say, well, they should have called this, and you can go back and find that 6 or 7 times throughout the course of a game if you really wanted to. A goaltend, like the ball was going to go into the net. The ball was going to go into the hoop, and then that's why the rule exists. That's why there's the rule there. And they missed it. And the Mavs would have been up by a point with 3 seconds left. Who knows what would have happened from there? But that's better than having a 0% chance to win, which the Mavericks had after that play happened. They got robbed. We'd feel way better if they had won that game. This is going to be a rambling video, as you could probably tell. I just want to talk really quickly about seasons from hell and how a season from hell begins, and what I think is the main the main driving force here, and I just want to use this as an outlet to vent a little bit, and I want you guys to hear me out here. Okay, I know we're upset as a fan base. The Mavericks fan base is upset at the way this is going, that we just want to blame so many different people. They want to blame the coaching staff. We want to blame the front office. We want to blame this player and that player. And I understand it. Like the Spencer Dinwiddie continuous isolations at the end of games, especially in that game against the Pelicans, it's terrible. It's awful. Is that Jason Kidd's fault? Sure, I guess. Be nice to drop some different plays. Is it Jason Kidd's fault for having Spencer Dinwiddie on the court, despite the fact that he was awful down the stretch of that game? I mean, I guess I want to put myself in the head of Jason Kidd and the head of a baseball. Jesus, I mean, I'm thinking about different sports, man. When does spring training start? Like that's where I'm at. Basketball coach, and just think about it through the frames of that. Like Spencer Dinwiddie's the only guy. Spencer Dinwiddie's the only guy on this roster that's healthy currently who you feel comfortable dribbling a basketball with. Is that good? No, that's obviously terrible. Spencer Dinwiddie's a minimum free agent signing for a reason. But you're without probably your three best play initiators. Luka's gone. Kyrie's gone. Exum hasn't played all season. Boom. There's your three best play initiators. And then, to make matters worse, last night you were without Derek Lively. I might even say Derek Lively's your fourth best play initiator. Whenever you operate out of the high post with Derek Lively, you're without all of those guys. What are your other options? They do not trust Jaden Hardy. They don't. And you know what? They shouldn't down the stretch of games. They just shouldn't. That's not his. He's a catch and shoot guy who can occasionally, attack closeouts and attack mismatches from time to time. That's Jaden Hardy's bag. You don't have another guard. Spencer Dinwiddie's going to be on the court. So all of those frustrations, I mean, you might as well just bottle it up. I don't know what to tell you, because that's not changing until Kyrie or Luka comes back. It's just a sad reality. I know ideally it's like, well, you could just have Najee Marshall and Quentin Grimes out there, who didn't close the game last night. Those two guys probably should have been on the court last night. Absolutely. But somebody has to initiate the offense. And I'm just like, a coach isn't going to throw one of those guys out there to take lead ball handling roles down the stretch of games. They're going to put it in the hands of somebody who's done it before. That's just the nature of it. And it sucks. Do I agree with it? Not necessarily. But I don't know what other direction you would go. I see people mad about the front office. This roster's not as talented as we thought. That's a prevailing thought. The roster was not built to sustain this. The Dallas Mavericks said, let's maximize our strengths. So when we get to the playoffs and it's 7, 8-man rotations, we're locked and loaded and ready to go. What's your biggest strength? You have 2 Hall of Fame ball handlers, lead guards, that are either in their prime or right around it, that are playing Hall of Fame level basketball currently. Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic. Guess what? Those guys are out. And if you want to extend it a little bit further, your identity is having those 2 guys, but then also having an elite rim running threat who can play make out of the short roll, who we can use as an offensive hub in the high post, who is our entire anchor defensively. Mavs defense just doesn't really operate without Derek Lively on the court, and he's missed time so far this season, and he missed the game last night. How many teams do you think are surviving that? We've seen this Dallas Mavericks roster fully healthy this season. Rarely, but we have seen it, and they look like a great, fantastic basketball team. In fact, they look like one of the best teams in the league. Their starting 5 group: Luka, Kyrie, Lively, PJ, Clay. I don't know if that will be their starting 5, in a playoff setting, assuming all those guys are healthy. I don't know what they do with Clay, if it's more of a Grimes thing. I don't know. But those 5, what you would consider it. 41 games, you're halfway through the season. 41. Those 5 have played 14 fucking games together. 14. And this isn't even counting like the start of the season when Lively was coming off the bench. That's just how many games those 5 have been on the court in the same game. 14. Luka, Kyrie, Lively, and PJ, your 4 best players unquestionably. 14 games when all 4 of those guys play. Luka, Kyrie, and PJ, 14 games. Luka, Kyrie, and Lively, 16 games. Folks, sometimes we overthink things, because I know we want there to be Band-Aid solutions for this. I know we want there to say, man, if we just fire Jason Kidd, or do this, bring in this guy, like everything's going to be all right. I need you guys to understand how difficult it is to survive something like this. I want to point you to this right here. Yes, I made this I made this chart myself. Yes. How did you know? Because it's so good. Look, I'm getting better. Like, this looks better than the graph I put up on one of my latest videos, although we have a little straggler here. I don't know what that guy's got going on. But this is lineup data right here. 5-man lineups. I wanted to go through and I wanted to look across the league. How many different teams are doing what with their 5-man lineups, right? The best 5, ideally, right? Your best 5 are playing the most minutes together. As you can see, I went and found how many teams, how many different 5-man lineups have played over 100 minutes per team, which 5-man lineup has played the most minutes per team, what their net rating is, and I also put their team record right here. The Dallas Mavericks are I think 8 teams. One of 8 teams that have yet to have a 5-man lineup play over 150 minutes. Let's take a look at these 8 teams, shall we? The Philadelphia 76ers. We know that they've been dealing with injuries. They've yet to have a lineup crack 100 minutes, but so they don't have a lineup with 150 minutes played. They're 15-24 in the season. The Golden State Warriors, they've been dealing with injuries. We know they play a 12-man rotation a lot of the time, so just a lot of different groupings out on the court. They're 20-20. Charlotte Hornets, bad team, taking team, dealing with a bunch of injuries, 9-28. Memphis Grizzlies, we'll talk about them here in a second. An exception to the rule here, 26-15. They're having a tremendous season. The Brooklyn Nets, 14-27. The Phoenix Suns, 19-20. One of the worst vibes in the league. Dallas Mavericks, 22-19. And the Washington Wizards, 6-32. I mean, as you can see, the teams around the Dallas Mavericks, granted, some of these teams are tanking. Some of these teams are not trying to be good. But it's very difficult to win basketball games when you're playing so many different rotations, when you have guys in and out of your lineup, when you're missing key players. And another thing that I want to point out here, let's go ahead and search by best lineup. This is really going to make you guys sick. Yep. The Dallas Mavericks starting 5, Luka, Kyrie, PJ Washington, Klay Thompson, Derek Lively, is the best 5-man lineup in the NBA. The best 5-man lineup in the NBA. Does that make you sick to your stomach? Makes me sick to mine. So has the front office done a terrible job of building their roster? I would say no, because they want to maximize their strength of having 2 of the best ball handlers we've seen in the last 15, 20 years. And they've done that because when those guys are on the court together, I believe their offensive rating is 130 with this quintet. 130. That's unbelievable for 100 minutes. I mean, that's not really a small sample size either. It's not a huge sample size, but it's not a small sample size. And then, I mean, this just feels like obvious stuff, but this happens every season, and then we seem to forget it. If you were just to look at the teams that have the most minutes played, 14 teams have had a 5-man rotation, a 5-man lineup with more than 200 minutes played. Only 2 of those teams have losing records. I mean, this is just kind of obvious stuff, right? Like, yes, if you're healthy, you're probably going to win a good amount of games. Like, that's the name of the game a lot of the times in this league is health. How healthy can you be? A lot of the times, those are the teams that are the best teams. They're just the healthiest teams. Could the front office have done a better job at finding guys who could keep the team afloat when Luka and Kyrie are out? Maybe. I'm here to give you guys bad news, though. I mean, they would never say it outright, but you don't build a team thinking, well, what happens if both of our best players are out? That's not how you build a team. I mean, it's really great. The idea of it's really great. And then you look at the Memphis Grizzlies, the Ja Morant's been out, in and out the rotation. Like, they've had injuries across their roster to guys, right? And they're still winning a ton of games. They're currently 3rd in the Western Conference, 26-15. Yeah, their scouting department, their talent development is crazy. It's probably the best in the NBA. Going out and finding a guy like Jay Huff, who comes in, plugs in, shoots threes, blocks shots, fits perfectly. They really don't miss a beat when he's on the court. Going out and finding a guy like Scottie Pippen Jr. Yeah, bouncing around the league, probably, on his way out of the league, if we're being honest. Turns into a great guard. They can bring it off the bench. Offensive punch, can score, can do a bunch of different things for him. Jalen Wells, they drafted in the 2nd round. Zach Edey, I mean, both of those guys are top 5 currently in Rookie of the Year odds. Like, they've done a great job. They really have. I would also like to point to the fact that Jaren Jackson Jr. is going to make the All-Star team this year. He's been unbelievable. He missed the first 2 games of the season, I believe. He's played every single game since then. So if you were to compare their situation to the Mavericks situation, I mean, imagine if Kyrie Irving had played in every single game but 2 so far this season. Like, that's how I would compare it. Obviously, it's much different things, but we talk about Luka being out and the record without Luka, yeah, it's awful. It's terrible. It's been tanking. But they're still, through all of this, 7-4 when Kyrie plays without Luka. The problem is you've been missing Kyrie Irving over this stretch as well. And they're 2-7 now when they're without both of those guys. I know it's so they've had winnable games. They have had winnable games and they've played poorly. Like the Nuggets game a few nights ago. Not the one where they got their ass kicked in Kyrie Irving's return, but the Nuggets game a few nights ago, Sunday game. They were up by 18, I think, in the third quarter, and they go on to blow that game. That's when you miss your guys. They score 12 points in the fourth quarter. That's when you miss just one of those guys. If Luka's in that game, you win. If Kyrie's in that game, you win. If both of those guys are in that game, you win because you don't have the run stopper. You don't have the guy to put the rock in his hands and say, "Go get us a fucking bucket. Go get us a good look." We desperately need that right now. And you're missing both of those guys. It's going to be tough. The last time I did a rambling video was right after Luka got injured, and I said, this is going to be a tough stretch, guys. Like, I know the record without Luka going into that stretch was, I think it was 6-2. And then they won the first game, and then it was 7-2. Life was great. You know, it's just, man, like, they're still gonna pull it together with Luka's out, and then Luka's gonna come back. He's gonna be fresh for the playoffs. I told you guys, this shit's probably gonna suck. This is not gonna be a fun stretch. Missing a guy for a month is much different than missing a guy for a handful of games. And man, it's gotten brutal. It has. I've seen people say, well, the Magic, like, why can't the Mavs be the Magic? The Magic were bottom 10 in net rating for a whole month without Paolo and Franz. It's not like they were dominating teams. And even then, I would say the Magic built their identity through their defense. And you look at their roster, Paolo and Franz, great defenders, great players, fantastic players. I love both of those guys. They still have the personnel to be a very good defensive team, even when those guys aren't playing. The Mavericks' identity is built around having two incredible ball handlers. That should be what their identity is. That's the roster they have. That's when you have a guy like Luka Doncic, that's your identity. And when you're missing both of them, it's tough. And you build your roster. The idea of building a roster is just to maximize your strengths. Having a well-balanced roster that can do everything is, yeah, of course, that's the perfect world. That's very hard to achieve. You look at the teams that you would say are like super well-balanced, the Thunder, that came from years of rebuilding, tanking, drafting high in the lottery, selling off assets, getting assets in return. You look at the Boston Celtics, it took them like 8 years to compile this roster that they have currently. The Cavs, years of building this roster. With lottery picks up and down it. Darius Garland, Evan Mobley. The Mavs, one of the biggest disadvantages the Mavs have had team building wise, and I'm really rambling here, is the fact that you drafted a guy like Luka Doncic in 2018. Immediately, way too good of a player to do 2-3 more years drafting high in the lottery. Way too good. Immediate, generational type player. It really hurts that the year before, when you also had a top 10 pick, that ended up being Dennis Smith Jr., who I love dearly, but obviously wasn't a player that you build a franchise around. But yeah, man, it's tough. I know. I know. Trust me. This shit sucks. It really does. There's so many things they could do better. Absolutely. Your margin for error without your top two guys is this big. It's this big. You slip up once, there goes an 18-point lead. 12-point fourth quarter. And there's the games are hanging in the balance of a bunch of free agent acquisitions and trade acquisitions that those are guys you bring in to complement Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. Does this make them one-dimensional players? No, not even. They're multi-dimensional players. They play really well off of Luka and Kyrie. They do the things that you need those guys to do. They can shoot threes. That can attack closeouts. That can attack mismatches. They can get 2 feet in the paint and kick the ball out, make sure the defense keeps rotating. Maybe we can get Luka and Kyrie a great look off of that. Whatever the case may be. Play some defense. But when those two guys are out, now all of a sudden it's Spencer Dinwiddie carry our offense. Yeah, that shit's probably going to suck. Daniel Gafford, who I've been hard on, and he had an incredible game last night. The best game he's had this season by a lot. You tell a guy like that, rim running center, who just provides a bunch of energy, great offensive rebounder, You tell him to go out there without anybody who can throw him lobs. That's his biggest strength, probably. It's going to look a little bit rough, probably, more than likely. Klay Thompson, hey, be this, guy who just attracts so much attention, takes up so much space on the floor, because teams have to just make sure that somebody's on you at any given moment. Can't leave you open for a split second. Take away the two best playmakers on the roster. Life for him becomes more difficult. And now you're asking a lot out of a guy like Spencer Dinwiddie's a minimum free agent signing. Klay Thompson, if this was Klay Thompson of 2017 who could do all of the different things that Klay could have done then, he's making $30 million. The Mavs have done a good job building this roster. This is a good roster. It is. It's a good roster when Luka and Kyrie are on the court. It's a good roster when one of them are on the court. I still like in my brain that didn't process this. Like even without Luka, they're still 7-4 when Kyrie plays. But now he's out with a back injury, and he's the way that he came back against the Nuggets, that was very encouraging. But the way he said after the games is something that he's gonna have to manage over the course of the season. I don't know what the hell that means. And then I do have to say we got to think up here. We got to use our brains. I know Mavs. I know organizationally you'll never sit there and tell yourself we're not going to beat this Nuggets team with Kyrie Irving. Right? I mean, I understand what you're thinking. Back-to-back, Kyrie's probably not playing both of these games if we're being completely and totally honest with ourselves. And, hey, just the last game, we had an 18-point lead on this Nuggets team in the third quarter. Like, Kyrie plays, he's able to captain the ship for a little bit. We win that game. So let's bring him back. And then we can rest him against the Pelicans the next night. You got to win the games you can win during this stretch. You just got to get a couple W's. It would have made more sense to me to have Kyrie play on the second night of a back-to-back against the Pelicans rather than the first game against the Nuggets. I get why you did that, though. Like, I'm not really going to sit here and criticize that because I understand the thought process behind it. This is just hindsight coaching right here. 2020 hindsight coaching. This is, yeah, I know, guys. I know. This shit sucks. Now, there's light at the end of the tunnel. If Luka comes back soon, you just got to win a few games. If we look at the Mavericks schedule coming up here, it ain't good. I'm not going to sugarcoat things for you guys. It ain't good. You've got the Thunder on Friday. That's tough. I will say Hartenstein's probably not going to play in either of these games. Friday against the Thunder, Thursday against the Thunder. Hartenstein's going to be out at least a week. So you're probably not getting Hartenstein in either of those two games, which... the blueprint's there to beat this Thunder team. The Mavs know that. Play with a bunch of size. The Mavericks beat the Thunder earlier this year when they were without Hartenstein and Chet by just being huge. You've got Charlotte on Monday. I mean, I would love to pencil that in as a win. I get PTSD thinking of that 2022-2023 season when the low point was losing to the Charlotte Hornets twice. That's a weird 11 a.m. game on a weekday. You better win that game, man. That's all I'll say. Minnesota, I mean, they're struggling. Oklahoma City again. Boston, Washington, that needs to be a win. So just looking at the roster, you have some tough games coming up. You got Boston twice in the span of about a week. You got OKC twice in the span of about a week. You got Cleveland in Cleveland. I mean, those are all really, really difficult games. This is kind of a brutal road trip right here. The Pelicans are playing better. Detroit's a good team this year. Like, they are just straight up a good basketball team. The Cavs, they're an elite basketball team. The Sixers... The Celtics, I mean, that's a tough road trip right there. And me and Nick were talking on Locked On that this is probably the stretch right here where you'd see Luka return right before the All-Star break. You got a 4-game homestand right before the All-Star break. You'll probably see him return in one of these games, if I had to guess. You got to figure out ways to get wins and stay afloat over these games. You got to figure out a way. You got to dig deep. You got to figure out something. Charlotte has to be a win. Washington has to be a win. This New Orleans game now after you lost last night has to be a win. Detroit, as I mentioned, they're playing good basketball lately. That probably has to be a win. Philly, you probably need to dig deep and get that win. And then can you just squeeze out one? OKC twice, Boston twice, Cleveland. Can you just, Minnesota, can you win one of those? One of those. That becomes the question. Anyways, guys, I wanted to point out through this, the lineup data stuff, just how difficult it is to win games like this. The Grizzlies deserve a ton of credit for what they've done. But they're the exception to this rule. It's not a secret that all of these teams with 5-man rotations that haven't played that many minutes together, whatever the case may be, aren't very good, are struggling. It's hard to win in the NBA like that, man. It just is. It really is. And the Grizzlies deserve a ton of props, but they were, they were injured as hell last year. They were terrible. They were a bottom tier team. It's not over. If you want to hear something positive, it's not over. They can tread water here over the next couple of weeks. Luka can come back and they can play at a 60 win pace over the back, a couple months of the season and be a top 5 seed. That's absolutely possible. I know I'm really rambling. We're really talking a lot. I want to close off with this because let's look at the standings here. It's not like other teams in the West are running away with this shit. This little clump right here, and I'll still include the Nuggets in this. Fuck it. This little clump right here, they all have problems. They're all struggling in their own right. I would be surprised if any of these teams turn it on and really kind of run away with things. So if you can tread water, you're in pretty decent shape. You just got to tread water. I just wanted to ramble. Feel like we all kind of needed a little therapeutic session here. Believe. You got to believe. Or don't. I'm not going to tell you how to do things.